When a flight attendant mocks a passenger, she has no idea who she's dealing with. But when the truth is revealed, everything changes. Subscribe now to see what happens next, and comment below where you're watching from. A black woman, Kayla Mitchell, sat by the window, staring out at the clouds, unaware of the storm that was about to hit. Her journey had started like any other, just another business trip, but it was about to take an unexpected turn. Kayla wasn't just any ordinary woman. She wasn't a celebrity or some social media star. She was the wife of one of the most influential men in the airline industry, Richard Mitchell, the owner of the airline she was flying on. But she preferred to keep her identity under wraps. She never liked the attention, and her husband respected her wishes. For her, this flight was just another way to get from one city to another without the need for any special treatment. She was just a regular passenger, or so she thought, as the flight attendant Tiffany made her rounds down the aisle. She noticed Kayla sitting alone. Tiffany was known for her sharp attitude and quick judgment. She saw Kayla, dressed in simple clothes, no designer bags, no flashy accessories, just a woman traveling quietly. Tiffany assumed she was just another regular person, likely of no importance. What Tiffany didn't know was that this woman was far more significant than anyone on this flight could imagine. Tiffany walked up to Kayla's seat with a forced smile, but her tone was anything but friendly. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Can you please buckle your seatbelt? You should have done that when the seatbelt sign came on." Kayla, who had been enjoying the quiet of her flight, looked up at the flight attendant, slightly surprised by the harshness in her voice. She nodded, quietly fastening her seatbelt, trying not to make a scene. But Tiffany wasn't done. "Do you not understand the rules?" Tiffany asked, her eyes narrowing. "This is not a free ride. We have to follow protocol." Kayla's heart began to race, but she remained calm. She was used to dealing with people who misunderstood her calm demeanor for weakness. She didn't let it get to her. After all, it was just a little turbulence from a rude flight attendant. But as Tiffany's attitude continued, the situation escalated. The other passengers watched the interaction, some with puzzled expressions, while others kept their heads down, pretending not to notice. It wasn't just the tone of Tiffany's words, but the judgment in her eyes that caught everyone off guard. Kayla was a professional, a woman who had built her own career, not someone who needed to be treated this way. As Tiffany walked away, Kayla took a deep breath, trying to ignore the feeling of humiliation creeping up. What did she do to deserve this? She had only been sitting in her seat, minding her own business. But in Tiffany's eyes, Kayla wasn't worth a second of her time or respect. Little did she know, this would be the moment when everything changed. After Tiffany moved to the back of the cabin, Kayla pulled out her phone, typing a quick message to her husband Richard. The conversation would seem normal to anyone else, just a quick check-in to let him know she was fine. But to Richard, this message would be the start of something much bigger. "Richard, I'm sorry to bother you during your meeting, but I just had a really frustrating encounter with one of the flight attendants. It was so disrespectful." What Kayla didn't know was that Richard's response was already going to change everything. As the owner of the airline, Richard had always kept his business life separate from his personal life. But this was no ordinary moment. Tiffany, unaware of who Kayla truly was, continued on with her duties, oblivious to the fact that her actions were about to come back to haunt her. She had made a critical mistake in judgment, one that would cost her more than she could ever imagine. As the plane continued its journey, Kayla sat quietly, waiting for the turbulence to pass. She wasn't one to cause trouble, but she knew she wouldn't let this moment slide. What Tiffany didn't realize was that her attitude had just set off a chain of events that no one could predict. The flight continued, but Kayla couldn't shake off the tension she felt from her encounter with Tiffany. Her mind wandered, thinking of what to do next. She wasn't the type to cause a scene, but this wasn't just about bad service. It was about something deeper. The humiliation, the rude assumptions, and the judgment. It all felt too familiar. But this time, she was determined to make it stop. Meanwhile, Tiffany went about her duties, unaware of the storm brewing. She continued to serve drinks, hand out snacks, and move through the aisles with a cold, distant demeanor. She had already forgotten about Kayla, dismissing her as just another passenger who wasn't worth much of her time. But Tiffany couldn't have been more wrong. As the flight neared its destination, Kayla checked her phone again, seeing a new message from Richard. He had replied almost instantly, "I'll take care of this. Don't worry about it. I'll make sure that flight attendant knows exactly who you are." Richard was a man of action, and Kayla knew that. But even as she read his words, she wasn't sure what would happen next. Would she regret speaking up? Was it really necessary to get her husband involved? But then, she remembered why she was doing this. It wasn't just about her. It was about every person who'd ever been treated unfairly, who'd been judged based on their appearance or their place in life. No one should be dismissed like that. Not her, and certainly not anyone else. The plane landed smoothly, and as passengers began to gather their belongings, Tiffany stood near the exit, ready to continue her duties. The routine was about to be broken in a way she never could have anticipated. As Kayla stood to leave her seat, Tiffany smiled politely, thinking nothing of the interaction she had just moments before. She was, after all, just doing her job. But then, she saw the shift in Kayla's expression. There was no longer the calm, composed woman who had been seated in her chair. There was something different in her eyes, a quiet power, a sense of control that Tiffany hadn't noticed earlier. Kayla stepped forward, walking with purpose toward the front of the cabin. She stood next to the cockpit door for a moment, letting the other passengers file past. Tiffany caught her eye, ready to offer a polite goodbye. But before she could say a word, Kayla spoke, her voice steady but sharp. "I'm not here to argue," Kayla began. "I just wanted to let you know that I wasn't happy with how I was treated today. The disrespect wasn't just from you. It was from everyone who assumed I didn't belong." Tiffany, taken aback, looked at Kayla for a moment, her mind racing. She wasn't sure what to say. I'm sorry if you felt that way," Tiffany stammered, her confidence faltering for the first time. Kayla gave a small nod, not interested in an apology. "It's not about your apology. It's about how you treat people. I don't need anyone to bow down to me, but I also don't need to be treated like I'm invisible. I'm the wife of the airline's owner and I expect better. This attitude, this judgment, it doesn't fly with me." Tiffany's eyes widened, her mouth opening and closing as she processed the words. Her stomach dropped as she realized who Kayla was. The woman she had so casually dismissed was the very person she should have been treating with respect all along. Before Tiffany could respond, Kayla turned and walked away, her heels clicking sharply on the floor. As she reached the front of the plane, the flight attendant paused, watching her leave. She felt a sick feeling in her stomach, suddenly realizing the magnitude of her mistake. She had no idea who Kayla truly was, and now it was too late. Just moments later, the pilot and another flight attendant walked out of the cockpit. Tiffany's face was still pale, her mind racing with the realization of what she had done. She had humiliated someone important, someone who could change everything with just a few words. As Kayla made her way down the jetway, she felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. She wasn't angry anymore, but she knew she had made her point. This wasn't just about getting her own justice. It was about showing that respect wasn't something to be earned through appearances. Everyone deserved it, no matter who they were or how they looked. Later that night, as Kayla settled into bed, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call from Richard. She picked it up, and before she could say anything, he spoke. "Kayla," he said, his voice calm but with a hint of amusement. "I've made sure that Tiffany understands exactly what happened today. She'll be getting a lesson in humility, and you won't have to deal with that kind of treatment again." Kayla smiled, feeling a sense of relief wash over her. But there was something else too, something deeper. This experience, this small moment of power, reminded her of the bigger picture. It wasn't just about one rude flight attendant. It was about changing the way people viewed others, about showing kindness and respect, regardless of status. Richard went on, I've also made a few changes to our training. I think it's time for everyone to understand the value of respect at every level. And as for Tiffany, well, let's just say she's going to be thinking about her actions for a long time. Kayla's heart swelled with pride. She knew that Richard would handle everything. He was a man of his word. But deep down, she was happy that she had been the one to stand up, to show Tiffany and everyone else that appearances weren't everything. As the night went on, Kayla closed her eyes, knowing that what had happened on that flight would leave a lasting impact. She had turned the tables, and the world would now see things a little differently.